In the context of the Pokemon franchise, we have seen a great deal of eggs, both in the games, where you can hatch virtually any Pokemon from an egg, but also in the anime, where Pokemon eggs often hint at the Pokemon inside with a decorative appearance, almost like an Easter egg. So that got me thinking, what if I designed 2 Pokemon eggs, each reflecting a different aspect of spring? But here's the twist, I had no idea what was inside when I created them. Instead of designing a Pokemon first and then making an egg to match, I did the opposite. I crafted 2 distinct eggs and asked my community on Discord to imagine what could hatch from them. An incredible 22 of you submitted Fakemon of your own based on one of the 2 eggs. Over the 2 weeks that I gave you to come up with your own designs, I also took a stab at designing Fakemon myself, picking my favorite of the 2 eggs, just like you, and drawing an original Fakemon that I thought was inside. So let's run through the incredible results, including each and every submission from all of you, plus my Fakemon. Keep in mind, we'll be going in no particular order. This is not a ranked list of your submissions, except for the top 3 for each egg, which I will specify when we get there, that I will want to take a little extra time to highlight and award a bronze, silver, and gold medal to, since this was a challenge after all, but we're all winners here. So let's get into it. First, let's talk about the eggs. I based each one on a different side of spring, at least as I know it in the Pacific Northwest. Here, spring is mostly rain. While some find it dreary, and by late April I'm definitely craving some sunshine, it also keeps our forests lush and vibrant. That feeling inspired the Verdant egg. When I provided the prompt for this challenge on Discord, I described it like this. This egg feels timeless and connected to the forest, as if it's been a part of it for ages. And for the second egg, I thought about what spring looks like when the sun finally does come out. Blue skies, blooming flowers, and in many places, the breathtaking sight of cherry blossoms. The Ornate egg captures that elegance. Its description, when you get close, the egg gives off a sweet scent. Could something exciting be stirring inside? As I mentioned, I designed these eggs a whole week or so before I even took a stab at my Fakemon, so I had no intentions about hinting at specific body features, textures, or even a desired typing for these Fakemon. Could the Verdant egg's green features be actual moss, or just a marble-like pattern? Could the Ornate egg's patterns be cherry blossom petals or dragon scales? I don't know. So that's why I'm excited to dive into all of your submissions to see the incredible variety of interpretations, starting with the Ornate egg. First up is Vimini by Whoops. They absolutely ran with the pastel colors that I provided. I love how the scale patterns on the pink part of the egg were translated into a collar-like set of scales on the pink part of the body. Very clever. I always love this classic trope of 2 opposite personalities stuck together. The artist wrote, Viminis share a body, yet have 2 distinct heads with clashing personalities. The top head is considerably more bold and curious, and in a constant state of renewal, even as it sheds its old skin for a new one. That old skin left behind will bring forth fertility in the flora surrounding it. The bottom head is shy and cautious, always looking behind and never in the same direction as its sibling. This Pokemon is very simple and abstract, yet believable all the same, and it's clear that the artist put a lot of thought into the concept and the symbolism behind it, sort of like something out of the first 3 generations. Very well done. Skunky Spinda gave us Mesmeraura, a much larger Pokemon that I assume would be single stage like Tropius, and another one that I just find delightfully abstract, a true early generation Pokemon. The artist says that this one is rumored to somehow be related to Cresselia and Xerneas, and the embodiment of eternal youth and beauty. The artist wrote, Mesmeraura is a strange Pokemon, only seen during the early hours of the spring season. It's rumored that ingesting the berries that grow from its body will cure any sickness. A shy Pokemon by nature, Mesmeraura is rumored to only appear before the pure of heart. I love this genre of Pokemon, ones that almost feel like mythical guardians or protectors, and this Pokemon nails that spirit without looking too complex or intimidating. Next up is Bloody 359's Mabbit, a magic rabbit Pokemon. I probably don't need to really explain what this one is based on, and it's impressive that it has such a large top hat without it looking unnatural. The artist did a nice job of integrating it into the design by having the ears be in the shape of a top hat. It's also nice to see a pure black or gray Pokemon that isn't a dark type. The artist wrote, synonymous with mischief, they use their psychic powers to create illusions to mesmerize and confuse would-be predators. Each individual has a preference for what kind of illusion they cast. while as some prefer to cast a veil of fairy dust, others cloak their body and leave only its ears visible, which many say resemble a magician's hat. Its magic dust gives off an intense chocolatey scent, which further distracts aggressors. Overall, this is exactly what I was looking for from submissions for this challenge, a rock-solid, simple Pokemon that feels very much in the spirit of the official Pokemon art style and an aspect of the spring season. Mega Rayquaza took the egg prompt very literally, or maybe not, since they interpreted it as a berry instead and gave us Fige, a larva Pokemon that, quote, hatch inside a very special berry and eat their way out, using the fruit as nourishment. This is actually a symbiotic relationship, as the berry has little flowers inside that are pollinated by the wasp as she lays her egg. As Fige eats through the berry, a few of the seeds within will combine with it, making the plant and the Pokemon one. Though this Pokemon will not show evidence of this until later in its life. Though I think for what I assume is the first of a 2 or 3 stage evolution line, the body plan of this Pokemon is a bit too proportionate and realistic, as in I would have preferred a slightly bigger head or eyes to emphasize the babiness. This first stage Pokemon absolutely succeeds in capturing my attention conceptually. It's probably the Pokemon that I'm most intrigued to see evolve of almost any in this challenge, so well done there. I love the submission. Next up, we have Flowita from Leafar, which is probably the Pokemon that I most pictured when I initially designed the Ornate egg. Though of course I didn't have any direct inspirations. I figured the pink patterning might be most interpreted as cherry blossom petals or reptilian scales, and Leafar gave both. They wrote, this Pokemon spends most of its life in areas with abundance in flowers and loves eating said flowers. Due to this behavior, they tend to fight over territory with combis quite often and scare away Flabebe. Pokemon trainers should be careful when traversing areas with an abundance of flowers, as one of them may be a Flowita. If scared, Flowita may spit out toxic or paralyzing spores before running away, as they are very easy to scare. If you wish to capture one, the best moment is when they stand straight up to bathe in the sunlight, as they might fall asleep during this activity. I just love a gentle giant, as I mentioned with Mesmer Aura, so this is another great entry. I also think the amount of patterning on both the head and the body are just enough to make this Pokemon interesting with such a plain, snake-like anatomy, something rarely seen in Pokemon. I'd love to see this promising design in a more dynamic pose in the traditional Pokemon art style. Noah W gave us Suitsu, a very clearly Japanese-inspired design playing with the idea of sakura blossoms and traditional clothing, like kimonos, ribbons, and a fan. They wrote, Suitsu makes its fan from the sticks and flowers that grow from its head. The winds blown from its fan give off a pleasant aroma. From the name and appearance, I would bet that this is also partially based on small dogs like the Shih Tzu breed, which is always a great starting point for Pokemon design, finding an appropriate animal inspiration. While some of the anthropomorphic features might be a bit far for my taste, like the jewel necklace, the amount of detail on the fan, or the hair that looks a bit more humanish than dog-eared, I think there's an incredible amount of detail put into this small design without it feeling overwhelming. Like a solid mythical Pokemon in the vein of Meloetta or Magearna, so nicely done. Next, Jock played with the idea of the egg quite literally as well, giving us Exotic, based on animals that emerge from eggs, including reptiles and the legend of the mythical basilisk, said to hatch from a toad or a snake egg incubated by a chicken. Jock wrote, scientists investigating the Ornate egg were surprised when this Pokemon emerged. Aside from the comb, eyes, and a long tail, their body remains hidden. A sweet and pungent aroma wafts from the cracks in Exotic's shell. The aroma intensifies when the Pokemon is angry or scared. Though there are many Pokemon out there that play with the idea of a half-hatched egg, much like Togepi, this one is really cool to me because it's based on reptiles, not birds. And I love the idea of a Pokemon half emerging while coiling around the remainder of the egg and its body remains unhatched. It feels in transition, not incomplete. While I would love to see a slightly more detailed version of the submission with maybe my original egg's features still depicted, this is a very solid start. And next we have Eyebrow9935's Weerm, a pure dragon type and a similar vibe as Jock's very simple and cozy design before, based on some sort of reptile creature. I don't even mind the use of green in place of my egg's pink, to match the baby blue, as it gives this Pokemon sort of a tropical vibe. I'd be curious to see how this one would evolve as well. And now, while everything I just discussed were in no particular order, here are my top 3. An outstanding batch of designs in descending order, starting with my third favorite submission for the Ornate egg. This one comes from Sassafrasinid, a poison grass Pokemon known as Pollargen. The artist said they were inspired by spring allergies and the idea of pollen, which can emerge from even the most beautiful and ornate flowers in the springtime. The shape language here is fantastic. Not only is the contrast between the rounded, noodle-like arms and the sharp head really pleasing, but the head is excellent in itself, both resembling the sharp edges that signal something toxic, like quills or a virus, but also a dandelion, or some other sort of budding plant with many stems. Genius. I gotta say, I even think the lime green matches pretty well with the other two more pastel colors I provided through the egg. Very unexpected, but it works really well. It's also a great case study in giving a more vague and abstract Pokemon a very clear personality. Sassafrasinid describes this Pokemon as, quote, a mischievous little imp in their description, and I can definitely see that shine through. My second favorite submission comes from Espirito with Mimoswirve. Again, I was dying to know how everyone would interpret the patterns on the pink part of the egg, and I like how the artist incorporated that into the petal-like feathers across the whole body. Perfect for a hummingbird Pokemon who drink nectar. So why not incorporate actual mimosa flower elements into its anatomy? The artist wrote, Mimoswirve bubble with immense energy. They are swift and clever, often avoiding and outsmarting opponents in battle. They can produce sugary water in their own body that fuels their hovering flight. When threatened, this Pokemon can use the sugary nectar to attack opponents. While I think this Pokemon could have used maybe one slightly exaggerated feature to resemble a real hummingbird's outline, a little less, maybe a slightly bigger head or larger wings, I think this is overall an excellent submission with just the right amount of detail, and it embodies the spirit of the Ornate egg really well. But at number 1, my favorite submission for the Ornate egg is Krill with Aerowigo, the fairy dark type Arowana or beta fish Pokemon. They wrote, Aerowigo loves being the center of attention, often fighting with the trainer's other Pokemon for it. The art perfectly encapsulates this personality, with excellent shape language all around. I love the curled fin on the top to resemble a boy's haircut, and the blue stripe that breaks up the body and makes it look like it's wearing a collared shirt, and even the larger nostril to give the face a bit more of a human quality without it looking uncanny. In my mind, this is basically the textbook example of how to stylize an animal-based Pokemon with real-world cultural or human features, something that the best Pokemon do. I think this submission lends itself well to an evolution, perfectly setting up an evolution line with a lot of personality. Will it redeem itself and become nicer, or lean more into that villainous, snobby personality? It leaves me wondering, which I think is the mark of an excellent design. It also doesn't hurt that Krill has basically mastered the Pokemon art style from a technical standpoint, giving us flawless shadows and highlights, perfectly complementary colors, and cartoonish but fitting proportions, as if this Pokemon came right out of Generation 5 or 6. For these reasons, this is my pick for the finest Ornate egg submission. Bravo. And now let's get into the Verdant egg submissions. First up is this adorable submission from The Puff, who gives us Flamby, a pure grass type Pokemon. This one feels straight out of Generation 5 or 6 as well, with a mossy coat and twig antlers, which I find quite nice. What's interesting though is that the Puff actually envisioned this hatchling from the Verdant egg to be male only, with female Flamby coming out of the Ornate egg. They explain that male Flamby evolve into a grass fighting type, while females evolve into a grass fairy type. So this is technically one submission and one Pokemon. For the males, they wrote, this Pokemon seems to be the male variant in its line. They appear to be the more reckless variant out of the two. It's advised to wear a mask around these Pokemon as they hold pollen in their face that, when inhaled, it can induce sneezing fits. They also seem to be less popular than their female counterparts. And for the females, the Puff wrote, this Pokemon seems to be the female variant in its line. They are often the more reserved variant out of the two, which only becomes more apparent upon evolution. While they may be as soft as a cloud, be careful when petting this Pokemon. They have pollen in their fleece that, when inhaled, can cause someone to fall asleep in seconds. They've become more popular than their male counterparts due to the fleece being useful for bedding and natural sleep aids. On concept alone, I really enjoy this Pokemon, and it helps that they have two solid designs. So well done. Next up is the very excellent Doya Tree by Nerd, which is based on does, doves, general plant life, and the concept of love. Aww. The artist wrote, Doya Tree are elusive and rare Pokemon, only being seen in the most undisturbed of nature. Even the slightest impurity in the soil can be fatal to them and their delicate biology. They are considered mythical due to the relative rarity and legends associated with them. Doya Tree are said to be the origin for stories about love. Various serenades throughout history have lyrics about Doya Tree. They become synonymous with love, peace, and union. It's said that if a Doya Tree is at the altar of a wedding, the love of the happy couple will be unshakable. I think my favorite piece of this artwork is the horns, which form a heart shape while still looking very natural with budding roses and small details and lines on them. I also think it's a bold detail to have the middle of the body be broken up by a wing-like cape, which definitely makes this Pokemon feel elevated, almost legendary compared to just an average fairy type found in the forest. I feel like I'm looking at something special when I see this thing. So kudos to the artist for getting that vibe across with this ethereal Pokemon. I do wish that this Pokemon was a bit more expressive, since I can't tell where its eyes are, and it might have one too many leaves or other details to believably be a smaller Pokemon. It's a bit busy. But those are the only factors keeping it out of my top 3, because this thing is just gorgeous. An amazing piece of artwork. Next, Gym Leader JC gives us Microraptor, which I think is a very nice interpretation of the two colors that I gave on the egg, green and brown. In this case, grass and rock type. JC wrote, there are cave paintings of this Pokemon dating back 10,000 years. It resembles the description from an ancient culture who worshipped a nature spirit said to bring about the spring season. I absolutely love this little guy. I think for a presumable first stage to a fossil or maybe even starter Pokemon, the huge eye does work fine enough. I'd like to see the concept taken a bit further though, with elemental stuff like claws made out of rock, or more clear leaf-like features rather than just green feathers, but this is a very solid concept that I would love as a fossil Pokemon in a future generation. Dolphin Dance 10 made another Pokemon, Fakemon, that literally integrates the egg into the body. In this case, the egg was just an armor-like covering to a sentry-like Pokemon, a ground type that patrols the forest floor. I am so glad that someone interpreted the pattern as camouflage rather than literal foliage. Of course, this wasn't a direct desire of mine. I designed the egg pattern almost at random, but it is nice to see a different take on it besides moss and rock. Very creative. I think this guy definitely pushes the bounds of a believable Pokemon in the right way. I think the choice to make the limbs a bit rounder and simple to look more natural or cartoony rather than overly detailed and mechanical, like this is a supernatural creature rather than a literal robotic sentry. This also sounds weird, but honestly I've always wanted more weapon Pokemon done in an appropriate way, of course. So this one based on more modern technology is super unique. All this guy needs is a more dynamic pose and I would go crazy for it. Very well done. And this unnamed one from Not Dracu-Nightmare reminds me of a certain creature that I can't quite place. All jokes aside, despite its resemblance to a beloved non-Pokemon IP, I really do think this guy stands alone in the Pokemon world, and it does have plausible deniability from just resembling a creeper. Rather than being made of leaves itself, it almost looks like the Pokemon is the cuter, smaller black part, and it uses these eyes as a decoy to scare off some predators and look more intimidating. Seems to be more of a Mimikyu situation. Very clever, and I appreciate you leaving in the concept art, so we get a sense of just how expressive this Pokemon could be in a real game. The more that I look at this one, the more it really does grow on me. For some reason, the simple roundness of the greenery and the exact shade of green really appeals to me. Love this one. Next, Mice gave us Patach, and might have won the award for the most ambitious concept. This little guy, very unassuming, bears resemblance to Gulpin or Swalot, and is another poison types based on not only zombies, like the mushroom ones from The Last of Us, but also mold. They wrote, these Pokemon are pretty weak by themselves. However, when they attach themselves to food, it uses the nutrients to become stronger. What's interesting about this one is that it has not one but 3 alternate forms. When it attaches itself to beans, it becomes speed form. When it attaches to bread, it becomes defense form. And my favorite, when it attaches to garlic, it becomes hardy form, which I assume would boost its HP. Mice also said they were planning forms for the other 3 stats. Special attack, special defense, and attack. Very ambitious. I would love to see those. Form change Pokemon are one of my favorite genres of Pokemon, and this one is just incredible conceptually. The artist also did a great job visually of making it look like the same Pokemon throughout, not only keeping the color palette consistent with only one or two complementary colors switched up, very restrained, but also switching up the shape of the simple eyes for each form to give a dramatically different personalities. This is a Pokemon I desperately wish was real and barely didn't make the top 3. Well done. Forgotten Moonweaver took the egg a bit literally as well, giving us Zinachtal, a turtle Pokemon that has a distinct mossy and rocky shell that it calls home. Conceptually, I love this Pokemon, and I think it has a lot of potential if it were to evolve into a much bigger Pokemon with a bolder shell or something. I would love to see a rendition of this Pokemon with a bit more shading and dimension to the shell, since I bet it would look really pleasing. Awesome submission. And Denoil gives us Sinsukos, I think I'm pronouncing that correctly, an ambitious Pokemon with 2 forms, one being Grass Psychic and another being Grass Electric. The artist wrote, "A Pokemon seems to have survived in this egg since ancient times. The moss that once grew on its shell has supplied the Pokemon energy in exchange for the spores to be spread. The moss synthesizes solar energy that is stored psychically as Sinsuchos rests, which it releases in the form of electricity upon awaking. It travels using wings it forms from moss and psychic energy. This Pokemon is just beautiful in such a mature way. I love how it plays with the idea of animals like crocodiles having algae or moss on their back as they age, showing how with age comes wisdom and beauty. I also feel like there's just the right amount of detail, with floating moss bits and growth all over the body, to make this Pokemon feel complex without feeling overwhelming. Props to the artist for using such a restrained color palette and only allowing the pink on the eye, and the second form, the blossoms on the body, to pop. While it would need a bit less detail to truly look like an official Pokemon, I think these are truly beautiful and original submissions that I could have never envisioned when I drew the egg. This is why I had all of you come up with your own ideas, just to see how creative you would get. Bravo. And finally, before revealing my top 3 submissions for the Verdant egg, here's my own take on the egg, Shrubberol, a rock grass type, inspired by the rainy, mossy forests of the Pacific Northwest. Its round, stony body looks like a weathered boulder, with a thick beard of living shrubs, ferns, and moss that sprouts from its chin. Perched atop its head is a pointed wizard hat of jagged stone. I wanted to do the rock type in addition to grass, not only to fit the egg that I drew, but also to reference the infamous Fremont Troll lurking under Seattle's Aurora Avenue Bridge, alongside Scandinavian myths about trolls. Shrubberol nestles into hidden hollow logs, its stone form cloaked by draping moss to protect from the rain and the wind that are common in the northern forest that it calls home. Legends claim each stone hat that it wears bears the imprint of centuries, recording every storm that ever swept the forest. After spring rains, Shrubberol's beard bursts into a riot of miniature ferns and flowers, which emit a sweet fragrance. Despite its ancient vigilance, this forest guardian is a mischievous prankster, scrambling pebbles and trail markers into playful patterns around wayward travelers in an effort to send them astray and out of its forest home. I had a lot of fun designing an entry for my own Pokemon eggs, and ultimately the Verdant egg spoke to me more, so that's what I picked. You'll have to let me know what you think of Shrubberol, because now it's time to reveal my 3 favorite submissions for the Verdant egg from all of you. In third, Liam gave us Squabble, or Squabble, which is based on this prehistoric oddity known as the Longus squama, and definitely leans more into the goofy design sensibilities that the animal inspires. I think it's a bold choice to have this Pokemon have extremely cartoonish proportions, with its giant head, skinny limbs, massive tongue and eyes, but it pays off quite nicely and it looks like an official Pokemon to me, almost flawless. I could see this being a design in a later generation starter first stage, or maybe even a fossil Pokemon. I love that Liam really leaned into the colors that I provided as well, which reinforces that prehistoric concept. This is an overall excellent piece of art that I wouldn't change anything about. There's so many directions to go with the next evolution, playing around with that long tongue, giving the Pokemon a more rocky, tough body, and of course expanding the leaf sail on its back. For these reasons, this Pokemon just intrigues me, and is 100% a Pokemon that I would want to use if it were real. Very well done, Liam. In second is Nomari from Anja Art, a very European Pokemon inspired by old castle walls and folklore about gnomes or trolls. Anja wrote, Nomori are mischievous Pokemon that can alternate between periods of intense activity and extremely long periods of rest. They can sleep for years on end, only to be awakened by the slightest noise that disturbs the peace of their forest. The shapes here are just so pleasing to me. So clever to have the gnome's nose at the front brick, or door to the castle. And I think the eyes fit pretty well due to the square shape. It's also really cool how an anthropomorphized castle has those ridges on the top that make it look like this gnome is wearing a crown of sorts. While they just translated the wavy moss patterns that I provided to be expected in some ways, it looks really well done here and it fits the concept perfectly, making this Pokemon look super ancient but also very cozy and endearing. This is another Pokemon that I just have to love because it does what a first stage Pokemon should do, look adorable in its own right, while also making me invested in this Pokemon's growth. This could be a really cool 3-stage line that I would love to see fleshed out into a full castle. But for my number 1 Verdant Egg submission, behold Peachquinox from Sandwich Jack. When I first saw this Pokemon, my jaw dropped. Not only is this a flawless rendering that looks indistinguishable from a real Pokemon, but the concept is one of a kind, with a serpent made of moss that rides atop the stone-like Pokemon beneath. Serpent Jack wrote, Peachquinox are actually 2 Pokemon, a stone creature and a mossy serpent. The stone provides protection and shelter for the serpent, and the serpent will absorb excess moisture that could damage the stone. On the days where sun shines the strongest, all Peachquinox gather in one field to absorb the sun's rays. What happens when this Pokemon absorbs the sun rays, you ask? Well, Sandwich Jack has humbled us with an alternate form, the Blossom form. When Peachquinox absorbs enough sunlight, this will cause the serpent to massively grow in size and power, and the dynamic from their normal state is reversed, with the serpent becoming very protective of the stone. There are few Pokemon in the region that can stand on the same level as a fully powered Peachquinox in ferocity. Now this is a form change Pokemon. It's amazing how one feature of the original form, the mossy snake, becomes a true beast, and takes center stage to protect its stone buddy. If this were real, this would genuinely be one of my favorite Pokemon of all time, based on the concept, color, and just everything about it. In a future Mexico-inspired region, I can only hope we get something as cool as this, because I think this perfectly shows the limitless potential of Pokemon design in my mind. Congratulations, Sandwich Jack. And congratulations to all of you for submitting to this amazing challenge. We got over 24 entries, showcasing the wide range of inspirations to be found from just 2 simple Pokemon eggs that I drew up. Thanks to everyone who took the time to submit artwork of your own. I hope to do another art challenge with a different prompt this summer, so stay tuned for that. Go join my community Discord, which is a great place to hear about these challenges as soon as they are announced, and to know when I am uploading or now streaming, which I now do every single Wednesday at 5 PM Pacific time. Come join me every week as we chat and play some Pokemon. We are currently making our way through Kalos in a fairy-type only Nuzlocke run, and it's a lot of fun. Oh shoot, and you know a steel-type move! Oh! For the most part. Also, go check out my Patreon to support the channel and future projects, like my long-awaited Fakemon region project, which I continue to finalize behind the scenes. Thank you to all patrons, especially Guardian patron KuroBlitz. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time for more content.